Again, I always look down.
I think we're live now.
Oh.
Hi.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Optimal Live Talk. I am Jennifer Talley. I'm the Assistant Director here at the Center for Optimal Living. I'm with Andrew Tatarski, the Director of the Center for Optimal Living. I wanted to welcome you all.
Yep. Love to continue. We've been doing these Optimal Live Talks now for part of the last year on different topics related to optimal living, harm reduction psychotherapy, all of our activities here at the center. And Jen's going to kind of give a little bit of an overview of why we thought it would be great to spend this time having a dialogue with each other and with you who are out there on basics. What is harm reduction? What is harm reduction psychotherapy and integrative harm reduction psychotherapy? And why do we believe that harm reduction is really an essential philosophy or framework for informing and improving the entire continuum of care for people that are struggling with substance use, other risky and addictive behavior?
Right. So what we're noticing is this trend that more and more people are actually approaching us to do trainings with them in workshops and consultation. And so we wanted to just give people a chance to learn more about the upcoming activities that we have, as Andrew mentioned, and then also describe what people could expect if they attended one of our trainings in the certificate program. And so just so people know, we offer different versions of our training, and we can definitely tailor it to the audience that we're working with. And so we do a yearly 3-day training. And this one is going to be held at the new school at the last weekend of September, so September 28th, 29th, and 30th. And that will be an overview of our model with an emphasis on the 7 therapeutic tasks of integrative harm reduction psychotherapy, which we'll talk more about in just a second. And then we're also excited to announce that we now have both an online and in-person version of our certificate program. And so we started doing that certificate program about 5 years ago, actually. At the new school, and now we've moved it over here to the Center for Optimal Living. And so the certificate program includes the 3-day training as part of it, and then it also consists of 15 weeks of 2-hour classes. And so,
Yeah, so in the certificate program, we cover kind of harm reduction psychotherapy from the beginning to the end, talking about the history, talking about the work of all of the major contributors, people that we've learned from and that we teach, and then we work through the integrative harm reduction psychotherapy model, as Jen just said, focusing on 7 therapeutic tasks, which we'll talk a bit more about.
Good. And so what's different this year is that now people have a chance to join us online. And so that will kick off at the end of February 2019. And so the goal is to be able to extend the reach of this training so that people in other countries, other states can also participate and then bring this work back into their communities, into their clinical practices as well, which is wonderful.
And really we were kind of reluctant to do an online version because we feel like, it's much more alive, when people are in the room together. But over the last few years, we've had this tremendous interest and, from all around the world. And we finally decided, we're going to give an online certificate program a first shot. And hopefully we can find a way to bring it to life, even though we'll be kind of in virtual contact with people.
So it'll be live classes with us that meet at the same time each week, which will be great. So we want to encourage people that are tuning in to write in questions if they want us to answer them. But as Andrew mentioned at the beginning, I wanted to just kind of help people understand some of the basic questions that we often get about the work that we do. And so one of the questions that we get all the time is, what is harm reduction? What does harm reduction mean? How do we think about it? And then how do we think about that work as it relates to the clinical work that we do here?
You want to share some of your basic thoughts about what harm reduction means to you?
Sure. I mean, to me, it really means truly joining clients where they're at and meeting them on their terms and helping them achieve the goals that they've identified for themselves. I think a big misconception about harm reduction that we often hear is that harm reduction does not include abstinence, which is very much not the case at all. And so for a lot of people, actually, abstinence is the safest form of harm reduction. What's different from a harm reduction model is that we don't have an abstinence-only requirement, meaning that we engage people and help them achieve a range of different goals that might include abstinence.
And I would add that sort of part of the radical edge of harm reduction is that, in fact, not only do we not require abstinence, but that we really try to meet people where they're at, but putting our own agendas and our own presuppositions, our own values to the side. And we think that that really lends itself toward creating a relationship and a space that's going to be conducive to supporting people in discovering, what's true for them. And so that our job really is not to foist our assumptions onto people, but to create a space to support them in discovering, what's really meaningful to them, what goals, what approach, and so on. And so that within that, of course, the full range of positive change goals become possible to consider. And also we might say that, we can, this is one of the essential basic shifts from traditional abstinence-only work to harm reduction, is that it moves from only abstinence as a measure of success and frequently a ticket to get into a helping relationship or treatment, to any reduction in drug-related harm or any positive change around substance use and related issues, which then enables, the interventions, the treatment, the support to begin where people are really ready to begin their process of positive change. It kind of opens the door to the entire spectrum of people that vary in all the ways that human beings vary in their diversity.
Right, and then we take a very holistic approach. We look at what's happening physically, physiologically, biologically with somebody. We look at what's happening in terms of their coping skills, their self-regulation abilities, and we also are aware of the social context that they're in and the ways in which that could contribute to their substance use, and then how we think about that in terms of developing a treatment plan.
Yeah, and what Jen's talking about, we call psychobiosocial modeling as opposed to disease. We think that is really tantamount to a kind of scientific revolution, a paradigm shift, which is necessary to really help better understand what addictive experience and addictive behavior is about, and why so many people are struggling with these behaviors and yet are still wedded to them because of many meaningful reasons and functions that these behaviors perform. So the harm reduction frame then enables us to open the door to engage people while they're sort of stuck in this ambivalent struggle about change. Whereas approaches that really require people to make behavior change before they've really had a chance to unpack the complexity, I think is frequently really a setup for failure right from the beginning.
Right, so our assumption is that substance use is meaningful. It carries a lot of different functions for people, and to ask them to stop a behavior like this without other coping resources or even understanding why they're doing it in the first place isn't really that effective. And so we really join people, we help them really be curious about their relationship to substances, and then to really determine what ideal relationship would I like to build with this substance, if any, to minimize risk.
And a lot of people, as we're talking, I think it should be clear that we're talking about much more than simply reducing harm. Reducing harm is a wonderful thing, and addiction by definition is harmful behavior. So we might say that addiction treatment really falls under the harm reduction umbrella. But we're interested in helping to kind of support people in reducing harm, but then really working toward their maximum optimal quality of life as they define it. So harm reduction may be limited in really describing how ambitious this work is. We've kind of thought about what are the values or the qualities that are inherent in this, and what comes to mind are compassion, acceptance, curiosity, collaboration, empowerment, respect. So, I mean, I've started to wonder if, we should be calling this integrative relationship-based therapy or, relational therapy. Since some people bristle when they hear the term harm reduction.
Right.
I'm not sure I'm ready to give it up yet.
Is this a good segue into us talking more about kind of what integrative harm reduction psychotherapy is, and maybe just an overview of the 7 therapeutic tasks?
Sure. Well, so we might say that harm reduction is an overarching philosophy, and we've been talking about some of those principles that kind of frame it.
I might also add it's an attitude. We talk about it as this attitude, this kind of frame of mind, this mindset that we have in the work that we do. It's how we approach it.
In fact, there was a harm reduction leader back in the 80s, an early pioneer, a guy named Dave Purchase, who was revered in the harm reduction world, who I think first said harm reduction is an attitude. It's sort of an attitude, a way of being with people, being with one another. We might even broaden it. But most people, I think, know harm reduction by its public health strategies. Syringe exchange, naloxone distribution, overdose prevention, safer sex practices and education. Substance use management is a term that Dan Bigg, who is another pioneer in the harm reduction world, came up with to talk about safer drug using practices. Now we're hearing about an increasing interest in supervised consumption rooms or supervised injection facilities, which Mayor de Blasio here in New York has just endorsed. So that's very exciting. But we think that harm reduction is a much broader philosophy that can also apply to psychotherapy, counseling, substance use treatment, helping relationships. And that's what we mean when we refer to harm reduction psychotherapy. Now, integrative harm reduction psychotherapy is our brand, our version. There are a number of harm reduction psychotherapy theorists who are out there that we collaborate with, that we've learned from and work with all around the country. The work that we do here at the center, we call integrative harm reduction psychotherapy. Do you want to say something about the therapeutic tasks?
Sure. I might just chime in and notice a question that just came in from Jorge from Costa Rica. Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
By the way, Jorge, it's great to see you and see your question. Back in February, I did a 4-day training down in Costa Rica with Jorge and this wonderful group of folks. So it's really nice to see your name there.
Right, so to answer Jorge's question, if you go to our website, centerforoptimalliving.com, if you go to the training tab, that's where you're going to see all the information about our upcoming trainings, the certificate program. And you can also contact us at info@cfol.org with questions, and we'll get back to you within the day.
Oh, and by the way, for anyone that's interested, at the website on our media tab, we also have a number of papers, professional papers that Jen and I have written, and some others that you can download for free. One of them is a paper called Integrative Harm Reduction Psychotherapy that I co-authored with a very close friend and collaborator, Scott Kellogg, that describes the 7 therapeutic tasks that Jen is just about to talk a bit about. And it has a wonderful case story of a person that I worked with. And you get to kind of see how the work came to life with this woman.
I just want to have this here. And so when Andrew was speaking about relationships earlier, I mean, that's what made me think we should segue into talking about the 7 therapeutic tasks. Because at the heart of our approach is really working to build a safe therapeutic relationship with our clients where they feel ready and able to tell us about things that maybe no one else knows about. There's a lot of shame and stigma wrapped up around substance use. And of course, people come in very anxious and terrified about really taking the steps to address it. And so really first and foremost is, the first therapeutic task of managing the therapeutic alliance and really working closely with clients to make sure that we understand what are their goals for treatment, what are the ways in which they want to approach those goals, and then that we're checking in about the nature of the bond and the relationships, that we're, working from this like really solid ground together, to collaborate really closely on what they want to work on.
Yeah. And really key skills that we have learned and we teach and we practice about creating safety have to do with using empathy, empathic listening. Empathic listening and kind of continually checking in with how we're feeling, because our own feelings often can kick up and kind of get in the way of our capacity to listen empathically. We then need to kind of reflect empathically what we think we're hearing, because we may be off base. And so we then reflect empathy and then need to check in. Am I getting you right? Am I hearing you? Does that resonate with you? So that we're continually trying to stay empathically tuned to our participants, the people we're trying to be helpful with. And those are skills that I think are useful for any relationship. Am I getting you right?
Right, are we on the same page?
We're on the same page?
Right, and asking permission I think is also important. So somebody might come in and maybe after, problematic use or, heavy binge, even just checking in, is this something you want to look at? Is it okay if I ask some questions about it? How do you want to address this?
Yeah.
So again, that notion of not coming in with an agenda, not foisting our own opinions or agenda on somebody, but really creating this space and this setting where they can really become curious about the relationship that they want to have with the substance ideally.
Yeah. And here's also another way in which I think, even though I said before that I think that harm reduction may not be the best word for all of what we're trying to do, it is a kind of banner that says we are not going to judge you. We're not gonna come into this helping relationship with presuppositions about the nature of your substance use or about who you are as a drug user. And that's really important to put out, because so many drug users have encountered treatments, mental health, substance use treatments that have met them with expectations and assumptions that have been really problematic and have derailed that sense of safety right from the beginning. So what we find is that when people hear, you're not going to make me stop using, or you're not going to require that I do anything except show up maybe with good intentions and motivation to make some positive change. We find that people who were supposedly unmotivated people become extremely motivated and extremely ready to be very open. Safety is a key.
And often more willing to embrace abstinence, maybe in the longer term as a goal, than they might have been in a different type of setting, where it feels more like a choice for them that they're embracing.
Yeah.
And so the second therapeutic task kind of falls in line with what we were just saying, too, is this notion that the therapeutic relationship heals. And that there is this powerful connection that we build with our clients. It's actually difficult to describe unless you've been in a therapeutic relationship with somebody, where just bearing witness, being with somebody, being attuned, listening, being really compassionate with somebody in of itself can be really healing. It's a way to rework maybe earlier wounds or other traumas that might have happened in other relationships with people.
Yeah, and Jen talked before about the idea that we could think about substance use or addictive behavior as multiply meaningful. One of the meanings that we think substance use always, or these complex relationships always carry, is relational meaning. That is, there's a symbolic meaning to the use of the substance. I use this substance as a way to care for myself. I use this substance as a way maybe to express a feeling of rebellion, a feeling of wanting to be free, wanting to be an individual. But we might wonder, why do I turn to the substance to care for myself rather than to a person in my life? So that's where the use of the substance has both a kind of a personal meaning, self-care possibly, but it also has a relational meaning in that I am more able to care for myself alone in private with this behavior than to turn to others. And so people come into the therapy relationship with those dynamics, and it's in that relationship where people have an opportunity to look at why they may be turning to the substance rather than turning to us, or talking with us about the needs and the feelings that are being expressed or cared for through the substance. So it's sort of, we're working on many levels, you know, sort of in therapy speak, there's this idea of a one-person therapy or understanding and a two-person. We're looking at the one person, what's happening between you and your behaviors, but also how does that relate to what's happening between us?
What's unfolding between
Yeah,
us.
so you get angry and you go out and you use the substance. Can you come in and talk with me about what I did that left you feeling so angry? And then I can maybe hopefully hear it without getting too defensive. And that can be a kind of a new healing relational experience around the anger that was being expressed through the substance. Yeah. And then we might think about, how does that relationship support people in developing better capacities to care for themselves, to manage difficult feelings.
Right, which is our third therapeutic task, which is enhancing self-management skills. And we tend to really, you know, rely on mindfulness skills as a core approach of the work that we do. And we really, through mindfulness practices, help people learn to just be in their bodies again, to learn how to notice what's happening, you know, what's unfolding. What are my reactions? What do I sense? What am I feeling? And then what's the narrative or what's the story that I'm creating around my experiences? And I mean, we know this just from the work that we do, but people are so self-critical, so self-punishing. And to the extent that we can help them just start to take a step back. And I like to say, can we just zoom out? Can we just notice what you're saying to yourself, how you're narrating this moment, and the ways in which that might lead you to misuse a substance as a way to just try to get rid of and turn the volume down on that really harsh critic that might be there.
You know, I was running a group one day, and we were talking about all of the reasons that people notice that they may engage in self-defeating or excessive and problematic substance use. And people started talking about bad feelings. That sort of emerged as a theme that people were like connecting with. And I became curious about, what is a bad feeling? What makes a feeling bad? And people said things like, you know, it's a feeling I shouldn't have. It's a baby feeling. It's a stupid feeling. It's a, you know, I should have gotten over that already. And that's an example of what Jen was just talking about. It's the narration or the interpretation of a feeling, which is simply a feeling, a sensation in the body that may actually even have information, important information that we need to learn to listen to. But if it's a baby feeling that I shouldn't have, I'm going to try to push it away or get away from it. Now I'm cutting off from myself. And now I feel worse, and maybe I need to use more. You know, you see, so the empathy, the compassion, the curiosity sets the stage then for supporting people in developing that greater capacity to be aware and mindful.
Right, and we found it particularly useful to be aware of cravings and urges, right? And Andrew often talks about how the craving in of itself is the axis of change. And so to the extent that we can help people become mindful and curious about the experience of an urge or a craving and how it presents itself, how it feels, how it sounds, kind of the texture of the craving. And then mindfulness is a way, it's a tool, it's a technique, it can be a practice that helps us just begin to pause. Can we just pump the brakes and just sit here for a second and really observe this experience of a craving.
Mm.
And then really begin to think through, how do I want to respond to this?
So when we talk about integrative harm reduction psychotherapy, we're wanting to integrate relational psychoanalytic or psychodynamic, for those of you therapy types out there, but sort of thinking about how the relationship is the context in which all the work takes place. Within that, we also want to create a space to help people explore and discover. That's what Jen is talking about, exploring into the craving, into the urge. What is this? What part of me? What is the feeling? What is the need, the wish? And then how does that relate to behavior, which may be problematic, which I can assess and think about making some positive change goals that I want to work toward. So it's bringing together a number of different therapy traditions. And the mindfulness piece, for me, seems to be a piece that bridges. It's a skill that in our relationship we can support people in cultivating, that bridges from exploring deeply within to looking at connections with behavior and thinking about what positive changes you might want to make. And then there's a kind of cognitive behavioral set of tools that can be brought to bear on the behavior change part. Mm-hmm. So we've got a lot of different tools that mm-hmm. we want to have access to, that we can offer to our clients mm-hmm. in a kind of a negotiation to try to figure out which of these tools is really going to support you on your journey, mm-hmm. right. your process.
And the hope is that by practicing mindfulness, or being more attuned to what's happening, people move out of this state of reactivity, of autopilot, into a state where there's more presence, there's more consideration, and it feels like a choice when you respond. Mm-hmm. And so this also ties into the next therapeutic task, which is assessment as treatment. And so we feel like, assessment is an ongoing part of the therapeutic process, and we're helping people, again, become really curious about what's unfolding. And we'll do what's called a microanalysis, where we help people understand what was the situation, what thoughts, feelings, and sensations came up, and then how did I respond to it? And then a lot of the work, well, definitely in the beginning of the treatment process, is just helping people unpack what happened. They might come in and there's been, heavy use, and it's like, I don't know, it just happened. And so we slowly help them make sense of and connect the dots of how they ended up in that situation.
Yeah, somebody once said that sequence that Jen was just describing mm-hmm. often happens in a split second, mm-hmm. right? Something occurs and we move into action. And we might think about that as sort of the addictive move, the addictive flight, the sort of loss of control is the lurch into action, maybe to get away from something, or to not feel something, or to not be aware of something. So all of these mindfulness techniques and breathing and kind of awareness in the present moment help people then be able to notice that moment, and, as someone once said to me, kind of slow it down, to catch it, catch the urge before we move into action. Mm-hmm. Jen talks about, putting a pause around that urge. Mm-hmm. Exactly. And the pause, which is with mindful awareness and breathing, curiosity, acceptance, mm-hmm. letting go of self-judgment and shame and all that stuff, then makes all of these other things possible, to become curious about it, to inhibit the addictive habit, which has been deeply, deeply ingrained and wired into the nervous system, mm-hmm. and then think about new responses, which are rewiring. Mm-hmm. So the assessment as treatment is really about what becomes possible when we can have a relationship and the person has some skills to sit still. Now we can start unpacking mm-hmm. those psycho-biosocial contributors, the multiple meanings, the aspects of the self. And then the fifth task is embracing ambivalence. Mm-hmm. want to talk a bit about that?
Mm-hmm. Right. And I think we're also very attentive to the fact that people might not yet be ready to fully be on board with change. I think that what we do here that is relatively unique, I think, in the field is that we welcome all parts of the client into the room. So that includes the part that is gung-ho and ready for change, who's willing to create a treatment plan with us and wants to make, a very clear plan. And then there's the other part that's very ambivalent, that might be resistant, not ready to make change, that wants very much to continue the old behavior.
Not only do we welcome it, we honor that part.
Mm-hmm.
That part of the person is as important and vital and meaningful and potentially positive as the part that wants to change.
Mm-hmm. Right. So really being able to have people dialogue and to even engage with both parts is an essential part of the process.
Yeah. Now, we can't really get into trauma and dissociation, but we might consider that there are vital parts of the self, of the person, that are often discarded for a whole variety of different reasons. I can't allow myself to be sad. I can't admit that I am needy or vulnerable. It's not, manly. I can't allow myself to feel grief. Just push it away, push it under the rug. Eminem said he stuck all of this in the closet, but then he had to clean out the closet. But all that stuff, that vital stuff, can get pushed underground and can live out of awareness in this addictive experience. And we want to create a space and support skills to inquire and discover into that netherworld, to bring those parts into awareness so that they can speak and they can potentially be integrated into one's life. So that's what lives in the ambivalence, which we want to embrace. Now we've got this ambivalence in the room. A part of me wants to change, a part of me doesn't. I think that ambivalence can create what I call a creative tension or heat, because there's sort of two opposing poles that want two different things. And that, I think, can generate a kind of motivation to come up with new solutions. If I really want to cut back my substance use or stop, the dangerous, risky behavior, what needs to change on the other side? What would be new solutions to what the substance is serving? And now we can go into the sixth task of coming up with harm reduction goals around the substance use, around all of the issues that are propelling it.
And we encourage people to get very specific about their own personalized plan, as we put it. Right, so getting very specific about, under what conditions would you use, what would it look like, and so we get very micro about the details of their use, but then also, back to the piece about ambivalence, also checking in as we're developing this plan. How's this sounding to you? Is there a part of you that's saying, absolutely not, I'm not interested? Let's talk about that. Let's welcome that part in.
This might seem very challenging to some people, but consider, when we talk about your ideal use plan, how would you ideally like substances in your life? We think about that as an exercise that's designed to generate creative thought, to generate and support an inquiry into, what do I want from the substance and what do I not want? Or I don't want it to hurt me or hurt the people I care about. So how might I have substances in my life in a way that might maximize benefit, minimize the risk? In many cases, that's having no substances. And maybe 50% of the folks that come into harm reduction therapy arrive at that as a goal, to take problematic substances out of their lives completely. For others, it may be keep one, but not another. It may be a much more moderate, controlled, ceremonial use of substances, recreational, to enhance, the quality of life. And, I think it's probably come across, we really believe that this approach empowers, it supports people in getting in the driver's seat of their relationship to substances or to their behaviors in a way that, an authoritarian prescriptive approach, it inhibits, it interferes with people developing those capacities.
It shuts it down.
Yeah. So people have the space then to discover, what is important to me? What are my values? How do these behaviors maybe threaten? Therefore, how might I want to modify the behaviors in a way that will be more consistent with who I am as a whole person and what's important to me?
So I know we're
running out of time. So do you want to say some closing things about the trainings that are coming up, how people might find out about them again?
Sure. So the best way to learn about what's happening with us is to go to centerforoptimalliving.com. You can visit our trainings tab on that website at the very top to learn more about our upcoming trainings. The other thing, if you want to learn about the training that's coming up in September, is to go to ihrp2018.eventbrite.com. We also have a newsletter that we send out on a monthly basis. So if you go to our website, at the very bottom of the website, you can enter your email address and join our mailing list. And then also, like us on Facebook and then follow us on Facebook, because we do have a pretty active Facebook community as well.
So I also see Inez from Colombia has joined us. I want to say hello to her. She and a group came to visit us a few years ago. But Jay Stevens has asked a wonderful question. Do you ever address with participants the social justice, social context issues? Absolutely. When we talk about psychobiosocial, we think that the social political context is tremendously important, both, at a macro level, in terms of its basically negative impact on people who use drugs, and that can contribute to the internalization for drug users of feelings of shame, guilt, self-hate, anxiety, the internalization of negative stigmatizing attitudes that are ubiquitous in our culture, as well as, the close cousin of stigma is the criminalization, which then makes every drug user a criminal. So how those social and political realities and attitudes live inside of people who use drugs is a key part of what we think may certainly make people contribute to people feeling bad and feeling worse and potentially using more and feeling more hopeless and isolated and more vulnerable to overdosing and dying. So, these attitudes of acceptance, compassion, curiosity, we think of as offering people a different set of attitudes that they can use to dislodge, to identify and dislodge this internalized negativity. And we also think it's important for us to talk with people about how they live as drug users or former drug users in this culture, which is so infused by negative attitudes about drug use and drug users. Just one last thing, and you can see I get kind of activated, and this is very personally important to me, is that I think that when we as helping professionals or anyone with some concern about these issues gets this perspective, I think we have a social responsibility to stand up and also become agents of social change, social and political change. In whatever ways we can do that, our families, our communities, with our politicians. And there are people all across the country who are organizing in different ways to take this on and address it, to make positive change at the macro level as well.
So we'd encourage people to look at the Drug Policy Alliance, the Harm Reduction Coalition, if there are any others that you want to mention.
Yeah. Well, there are local groups all over the country. in Bloomington, Indiana, I was invited to give a keynote at their second annual opioid crisis summit, which is happening in September. And so there, the local Bloomington government is organizing a summit that will be addressing all of these issues, both the personal and the political. We have contacts all over the country that are organizing in these ways to do this.
It's good to see that.
Yeah.
But I guess the last piece that I'll add, and I think this is a unique part of the way that we work together and that how we train people too, is that we have a very experiential approach to what we do. And so I think that people that do attend our trainings leave feeling like they really have a good understanding of what we do, but they also feel it from the inside out.
Yeah, we feel like if you're working as a helping person, whether a family member, a friend, a professional, a police officer for that matter, if you're going to engage empathically in an empathic attuned way with the person you're trying to be helpful to, we need to be connected to ourselves emotionally so that we can kind of reflect an understanding from a true human place within ourselves. And so in our trainings, we're working both explicitly at an intellectual level, talking about theory and technique and strategies, but we're also continually trying to ground it in a felt place, in how we feel. And we also know we're all doing this work for very personal reasons, whether family members or friends or our own personal experiences of struggling or just being socially conscious and aware of the needs of others. And so I think it's important for us to be continually working on ourselves, as well, at an emotional and felt level, as well as at an intellectual level. So our trainings are very alive in that, in those multiple levels.
The groups really do connect with one another, which is great to see.
Yeah.
So we should
wrap it up. It's been great having an opportunity to spend this time with you, Jen, and with the folks out there. And maybe we'll meet some of you at some of our upcoming activities. But certainly, if you've got questions, comments, want to be in correspondence with us, you can catch us through the website or through this Facebook page. And we'd love to keep the conversation going.
Right. So stay tuned. We'll have one of these again next month.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Take care.
Take care, everyone. Enjoy the day.